Title: Whispers in the Stacks. Staying late at the library was not uncommon for me, especially during exam season. As a diligent student, I often found solace among the musty tomes and towering bookshelves. But one fateful night, my passion for knowledge would lead me to a sinister discovery that would change my life forever. The clock struck midnight as I delved into my research, the soft glow of the reading lamp casting eerie shadows on the books. The library was empty, its silence broken only by the faint rustling of pages and the ticking of the ancient clock on the wall. Lost in my studies, I barely noticed the subtle shift in the air, the feeling that I was no longer alone. An inexplicable sense of unease washed over me, causing the hairs on the back of my neck to stand on end. I looked around, expecting to find a fellow student studying late like me. Instead, I saw him, the librarian. He stood at the end of the aisle, his gaunt figure shrouded in darkness. His eyes bore into me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. But what struck me the most was the sinister grin that played on his lips, revealing a hint of malevolence beneath his polite facade.
"Good evening, dear,"
he greeted, his voice unnaturally smooth and velvety. "Good evening," I replied, trying to appear unaffected by his unsettling presence. "I didn't realize the library stayed open this late."
"Oh, for diligent scholars like you, the library is always open,"
he said, a knowing glint in his eyes.
"You have a thirst for knowledge, don't you?"
I nodded, trying to mask my growing unease. "Yes, I find comfort in books and learning." He gestured towards the stacks of books around me.
"There's so much knowledge here waiting to be discovered, but beware, not everything you find in these books is meant to be known."
His cryptic words sent a chill down my spine, but curiosity got the better of me. I brushed off his warning as a mere eccentricity, attributing it to the late hour and the eerie ambiance of the library. As I continued my research, I noticed that the librarian seemed to follow my every move. His gaze never left me, and I could feel his presence lingering at the periphery of my vision. The feeling of being watched intensified, and I found it harder to concentrate on my studies. The library's atmosphere grew oppressive, suffocating me with its unseen weight. The faint scent of incense filled the air, its aroma sickeningly sweet. The librarian's presence seemed to envelop me, making it difficult to focus on anything but his unsettling gaze. Suddenly, a book fell off the shelf nearby, the loud thud echoing through the silent library. I jumped, my heart racing, as I looked around for the cause of the disturbance. But the librarian merely smiled, seemingly unperturbed by the incident.
"Forgive me, dear. I must have misplaced that book. Allow me to retrieve it for you."
Before I could respond, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving me alone in the dimly lit aisle. The silence seemed to stretch on forever, broken only by the sound of my own rapid breathing. A feeling of dread settled over me, and I made up my mind to leave. I gathered my belongings, my hands trembling as I stuffed my notes into my bag. But just as I turned to leave, the librarian reappeared before me, holding the fallen book in his outstretched hand.
"Here you are. You wouldn't want to leave without this."
I hesitated, my instincts telling me to get away from him as quickly as possible, but curiosity and politeness compelled me to take the book from his hand. As I did, I felt a jolt of energy surge through me, as if something had passed between us. My vision blurred and I stumbled backward, disoriented. The librarian's smile grew wider, his eyes gleaming with triumph. It was then that I realized the truth. He was no ordinary librarian. He was something else, something dark and malevolent.
"You've taken something from me, and now you belong to me."
Fear paralyzed me as I tried to comprehend his words. Before I could react, the library seemed to come alive. The bookshelves groaned, their dusty tomes flying off the shelves and swirling around me in a chaotic dance. The incense filled the air, thickening like an impenetrable fog. I tried to run, but an unseen force held me in place. The librarian's laughter rang in my ears, a haunting sound that seemed to come from all directions.
"You sought knowledge, my dear?"
he taunted, his form shifting and contorting.
"But some knowledge is better left undiscovered."
In a last desperate attempt to escape, I recited an incantation I had once read in a forgotten tome, hoping it would banish him. But instead, the words seemed to fuel his power, and the room grew darker, the shadows merging into a suffocating darkness. As I stood there, paralyzed by fear, I realized that I had unleashed something beyond my comprehension. the demon librarian had claimed me, and there was no escape from his malevolent grasp. And so I remained trapped in the haunted library, a prisoner of the demon's twisted game, my soul forever bound to the shelves of knowledge, eternally seeking answers to questions I dare not ask.
Title: The Librarian's Labyrinth. My boyfriend Mark and I were always fond of spending time in unconventional places. So when we discovered that the local library offered late-night study sessions during exam week, we eagerly seized the opportunity. Little did we know that our thirst for knowledge would lead us into the clutches of a deranged serial killer, hiding in the guise of a librarian. As we entered the librarian welcomed us with a smile that seemed a little too forced. His thin frame and piercing eyes gave me an uneasy feeling, but I shrugged it off as exam week nerves. Mark and I settled at a secluded table near the back, surrounded by towering bookshelves filled with ancient tomes. As we delved into our studies, the hours flew by. The library's dim lighting created an eerie ambiance, casting long shadows that danced around us. With each passing minute, the library grew emptier until only a few dedicated students remained, including us. The librarian, whom we now knew as Mr. Carrington, patrolled the aisles, shelving books, and occasionally glancing in our direction. His eyes seemed to linger on me, and I tried to ignore the discomfort that settled in the pit of my stomach. After what felt like hours, Mark finally closed his books with a sigh.
I need a break. Want to explore the library a bit?
I welcomed the distraction and agreed, hoping it would alleviate the unease that had been gnawing at me. We set off, wandering through the maze-like aisles filled with centuries-old books. As we roamed, a peculiar sight caught my eye, a hidden passageway concealed behind a shelf. It seemed out of place, its entrance obscured by a dusty book on the floor. Curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to explore this uncharted territory. Cautiously, we pushed the shelf aside and stepped into the narrow corridor. The air felt colder, and the distant glow of the library's lights seemed to dim. I glanced back, but the entrance had vanished, leaving us stranded in a labyrinth of darkened passageways. Mark, I don't like this. We should go back, I urged, my voice trembling. But Mark, ever the adventurous one, dismissed my fears.
Come on, it's just a hidden part of the library. Let's see where it leads.
Reluctantly, I followed him deeper into the labyrinth. The walls seemed to close in around us, and I felt as if I was being watched by unseen eyes. The corridor twisted and turned, leading us further away from the library's familiar surroundings. Suddenly, we stumbled upon a hidden room. Its walls were lined with photographs of students, pictures I recognized from the local news. My heart pounded as I realized the truth. These were the victims of a serial killer who had been terrorizing our town. Before we could react, Mr. Carrington appeared in the doorway, his smile now a sinister grin.
Ah, you've discovered my little secret,
he said, his voice dripping with malice. Fear gripped me, and I tried to back away, but the passageway had vanished, leaving us trapped in the killer librarian's lair. Mark lunged at Mr. Carrington, but the librarian was surprisingly strong, overpowering him effortlessly. "Let us go," I shouted, my voice trembling with terror. Mr. Carrington laughed, his eyes gleaming with madness.
You see, my dear, I'm not just a librarian. I'm an artist who creates masterpieces out of human flesh and bone.
Mark and I exchanged horrified glances as we realized the true extent of the horror we had stumbled upon. We were in the clutches of a sadistic killer, and our lives hung in the balance.
I'm going to add you both to my collection,
Mr. Carrington taunted, brandishing a gleaming knife. In that moment, survival instincts kicked in. I searched the room for any means of escape, and my eyes fell on a loose brick in the wall. I feigned compliance, distracting Mr. Carrington while I carefully pried the brick free. When the moment was right, I swung the brick at the librarian's head, catching him off guard. Mark seized the opportunity and tackled him to the ground, wresting the knife from his grasp. We fought with every ounce of strength, the adrenaline coursing through our veins. But the killer librarian was relentless, his madness giving him an unnatural strength. As we struggled, I spotted a switch on the wall nearby. Without hesitation, I lunged for it, praying it would open a way out of this hellish place. With a flick, the secret passageway's entrance reappeared, and we scrambled toward the light. With one final burst of strength, we managed to escape the librarian's lair, the hidden passageway sealing itself behind us. We stumbled back into the familiar surroundings of the library, gasping for breath. But the horror wasn't over yet. Mr. Carrington was hot on our heels, his eyes ablaze with fury. We ran for our lives, zigzagging through the aisles, trying to put as much distance between us and the killer librarian as possible. Just as it seemed like we were doomed, the library's entrance came into view. Freedom was within reach. Mark and I sprinted toward it, but the moment we stepped outside, the library doors slammed shut with an ear-splitting thud. We were trapped again, this time on the outside, while Mr. Carrington's sinister laughter echoed from within.
You can't escape me. I always get what I want.
As we stared at the closed doors in horror, the library's lights flickered and died, plunging us into darkness. Mark and I clung to each other, knowing that we were at the mercy of a sadistic killer who had claimed countless lives before us. The library's facade glowed with an eerie light, revealing sinister symbols etched into the walls, symbols that we recognized from Mr. Carrington's lair. We were trapped in his nightmarish world with no way out. And so, Mark and I remain imprisoned in the librarian's labyrinth, forced to play his twisted games, never knowing when he'll come for us next. We have become part of his macabre collection, doomed to be his victims forever. Another chilling chapter in the serial killer librarian's dark and twisted legacy. Click the subscribe button and bell icon for more nightmare-inducing stories.